Thank you, Mr. President. And I do stand to support this bill that is presented before us, the St. Lucia Youth Empowerment Project Bill. But before going further into this very short and brief, three-pointed statements to this bill, I wish to take lead through you, Mr. President, and add my voice to yours in recognizing at this point in time the suffering that has taken place in the North Caribbean territories. And of course, as we send our prayers to our brothers and sisters who have encountered the ravages of storms and hurricanes, we do remember our own vulnerability and remind ourselves that, I do not like to say spared, but mercies were granted to us at this time, and we fasten ourselves and prepare ourselves to assist in the ways that is best. Permit me as well to recognize our newly appointed Senator Timothy Mangal and his family who is present here, acknowledge them as well. And as we will embark on this task of edifying our public on matters relating to government, I do hope that the contributions across this side as yard will add more clarity and remain within the confines of what is proper for St. Lucia. As it relates to this substantive motion before us, I must confess that this initiative started off with the last administration, and I personally made my contribution. And the last that I did before election was the visitation of a number of communities with the Caribbean Development Bank for this particular project. I also wish to inform through you, Mr. President, that a number of activities leading to this phase of the project we embarked with USAID, UNDP, and the Caribbean Development Bank. And of course, it seeks to bring to St. Lucia, to the families of St. Lucia who are vulnerable, as it were, a holistic approach to youth empowerment. And what do I mean by this? I know associated with this, we were also looking at a number of family laws, because you really cannot isolate the laws pertaining to families from youth empowerment and the issue of crime associated with our youth. And as the motion was being presented, I couldn't help but to reflect on the challenges we have, even in implementing a project like this, and much care should be taken, because we live in a very small society, Mr. President. And whereas we may think of the intervention being in the city, I want to suggest or even reflect that the young men and women who are deviant in their behaviors are coming from sometimes way outside of the city to be in the city. And if it's a holistic intervention where the families are involved, of course the assumption would be made that we are targeting families within the city, but for some young people who are loitering in the city, their families might be elsewhere. Of course, any attempt to deal with crime, of course, the ecological model suggests that we should look at societal factors. We should look at factors relating to the families, factors relating to the individual, because it is about relationships. So we are looking to empower our youth and to give them this sort of self-determining position in our society where they could decide for themselves. Mr. President, it's very, very important that we do so, because the powerlessness of our young people contributes sometimes to their behavior. And at this time, I just want to reflect on this point made as the leader of government business spoke to it, and I just need to mention it in a passer, because yes, we are trying to assist our sister families across, and but our Prime Minister did indicate that he's willing to accept prisoners, and of course prisoners are people too, like the leader of business said. Of course we recognize, because we're dealing with, in this initiative, young men and the whole issue of the relapse of crime, so we're dealing with persons who have education with the law. But on the part of assisting persons from the UK territories, I would have suggested and expressed an opinion that the UK has approximately over 150 prisons. In St. Lucia we have one, and our prison was designed by the UK experts. The population was designed to hold approximately 445 prisoners, and I understand as it stands now we have over 500 persons at Bordelais. So one would ask, isn't the UK more able with 150 prisons to house prisoners than St. Lucia with only one prison that's already, filled to capacity and is beyond? That in itself is a discussion that, upon reflection, one may wish to consider. But our actions as to how we deal with our population, even within our prison, send signals to the wider community and to the young men who are behaving, because they reflect on these issues as well. The main part of my contribution resides on a statement made by our Commissioner of Police recently with the rise of crime that has been taking place. And he made the statement, and I quote, "The young people really need help. It clearly shows that they have no love in their hearts." This statement was made a few days ago by our Commissioner of Police. And it underpins everything that I would say thereafter. That the young people really need help. It clearly shows that they have no love in their heart. And I wish to move on to suggest that the best definition I've received for love was what is in Scripture, God is love. And that definition was echoed by Dr. Stephen King in a consultation we had some years ago, when he used the same approach. So he said, what is love? And Dr. King said, okay, well, I have one definition. God is love. So the Commissioner of Police, rightfully, and he made this profound statement, that our young people have no love in their heart, and they need help. And I asked myself the question, how are we responding as a nation? There's one thing that I saw, Mr. President, and I want to link it to this. A few days ago, it was shown on social media that somebody's wanted and is a serial rapist. And it went viral. And a few days later on social media, I saw a young man tied up with ropes and looked like he was beaten up. I saw it on social media, and looking like the same person that I saw, apparently the person may have been apprehended. And I'm saying, Mr. President, that as a society, we must not encourage persons to take matters in their own hand. Because when we're speaking of youth empowerment, and we're speaking about a holistic intervention that looks at family, the society, the individual, we should spend some time and reflect on the individual, because a weakness in our society is one dealing with mental illness. And I really do not want to judge anybody harsher than God. I would want God to judge me. And sometimes I ask myself, do we know everything about the person? That somebody say that here's a serial rapist, and then the next thing you find action has been taken. I'm not suggesting that we should not stand strong in our society and send the strongest signal to criminal elements. I am not suggesting that. And I'm very much supportive of our police. And I notice our leader of the police, well, not police department, but our leader here representing the whole division of crime had to leave the parliament sometime a few days ago because, business was really hot in town, where persons are now attacking our own policemen. But the issue of crime and youth empowerment and the relapse of crime, we need to create an environment where we are not just saying that they do not have love in their heart, but our society must become concerned about our young people. There must be concern being demonstrated. And how is that demonstrated? That is demonstrated as to how we must restrain ourselves from executing judgment without persons going through the corridors of what our administration of justice. We must show love by, as a population, restraining by taking actions in our own hands and hurting persons who may need more than just incarceration. So from the individual level, I think the whole issue of mental illness comes into play. That comes into play. And of course, we know the issue of mental illness in our society and the stigma that's associated with it. You know. And sometimes I want to believe, Mr. President, that quite a few persons who should be treated for mental illness are not in a position to receive because of the stigma attached to it. Some time ago, we had a mental facility we call LATOC. And the word LATOC, which is the name of the place, it took me a while to grow old to understand that LATOC was not a name of a mental hospital, but the place was referred to LATOC. And you could, if you're behaving a particular way in Castries, they will tell you, Buzai LATOC. You understand? So mental illness is an issue, and any holistic intervention that dealing with youth empowerment, young men and the relapse of crime, the ecological approach or the model we're using to do that intervention suggests that we should look at the individual at one level and pay close attention. I've been part of the interventions we have had at the Boys Training Center. I've worked with the young men at Grass Street, one of the communities that were visited during the setting up of this program. And of course, I've heard from medical experts saying that a number of our young men at the Boys Training Center, you know, we should revisit them as it relates to mental illness and this sort of thing. So yes, I support the initiative, and the holistic approach comes into play. At the community level, this program is expected to dovetail in existing programs within that we have established. And the Ministry of Social Transformation through, I think, the Ministry of Equity at this time, but I believe the nomenclature for the people who hold positions there in the communities are social transformation officers, I believe. They are in the communities intervening, mobilizing, working with young people, and might be the first set of individuals to get in, to come in touch with these individuals. Schools, the teachers. So I ask myself, in terms of community, how do we take this into consideration? How do we link it? How do we cause there to be a serious link in terms of youth empowerment? And one program that comes to mind, and I think we need to revisit, is that of the laptop program for children. And I'm saying this, Mr. President, not to be political necessarily, but it's important that we look at the laptop program. I'll tell you why. I've had the opportunity to give a few young men who are going to their homes in Coolitown a ride. And I asked them what is it they needed for the community. I just asked them that. At that time, there wasn't an IT center. They said an IT center. I said, why? I said, but there's one in the school. They said, well, look at the highway. When it's 6 o'clock, we cannot go back to the school. And anyway, the school closed, we cannot use the school IT center. At the level of the Ministry of Education and Maintenance, and we noticed within this opening, maintenance is a costly, undertaking. And when you have IT labs with computers, it calls for systematic maintenance of these labs so that they remain there for children to be used. We are challenged by our ability to maintain our plant. We are challenged to maintain those items. What I noticed, on the other hand, when there were a few laptops children were developing at their home the abilities to fix their own laptops. As a matter of fact, I was amazed that my daughter took the phone. She had two A-level and had the screen changed for $20. The children were developing their own skill that you would imagine you would have to pace at some, somewhere else for. The issue of the laptop provided and allowed children to go home with a laptop. They had access to it. It contributes to youth empowerment. And that, to me, is very important. The other area, the one at the societal level, of course, the climate in our society, our policies. And I know that this particular program, as stated in the document by the Caribbean Development Bank, is really to enhance the government's capacity to deal with youth and the problems associated with youth. But I ask the question, Mr. President, with just 2.6 or 3-point-something million dollars US, approximately 8 to 9 million EC dollars, and while I heard that it's supposed to be a pilot program, I suspect that a lot of the interventions we have done in the past, you would find that it's really being repeated. So I do not see it as a pilot program. I see it as another phase to some of the interventions that we've done. As a matter of fact, as described here, if you go through the Ministry of Social Transformation, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, you go to the SSDF, there isn't anything written in this that is so new that's new that you call that's piloted. These initiatives have been piloted in the past. Community policing. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things that I've said to a number of the donor agencies that usually come to our doors to assist us to take some loans and grants, and they almost believe that they want to teach us what to do, not recognizing that we most times have persons taking consultancies for them in other countries, leading other countries. They need to understand that we do have some capacity, significant capacity to deal with our problems because we have done quite a bit. But at a societal level, at a government level, the political commitment to youth empowerment is significant. And whereas I heard the Minister in Finance saying that we need to put our money by our mouth, well, if you're going to put money by your mouth in terms of youth empowerment, and you start with 10 million, Mr. President, I tell you, I put no money yet. If you'd put $100 million, I'd say, wow, you're talking something. But I know you're just starting, and I'm expecting that you will come with a lot more in future. You'll come with a lot more. But I am saying that as a government must demonstrate that there's a pro-youth approach in its overall business. A pro-youth approach. And I do speak to persons at the other house, at the other level, in terms of how we engage youth within the communities. A pro-youth approach in terms of how we administer social services, existing social services, because we are saying that it is to enhance our capacity. I would tell you, Mr. President, sometimes it pains me listening to some parliamentarians when they say what they have done in their community or what they're doing. It speaks as if we were not concerned about empowerment. I'll give you a classic example, Mr. President, and we may wish to consider it. So we have the school books program. Let's say we have a welfare program at the Ministry of Education. Wouldn't it be best that a parent with the child can walk to the Ministry or the Welfare Department and based on assessment received, as against in the culture of the minister sent me, or they didn't send me because I'm not one of them? How could that culture engender, promote youth empowerment when the youth of this country believes that they would be assisted based on political leaning or political affiliation? And where best should a youth go for support? Is it in the parliamentary office of a politician if he or she knows that his or her mother was not of that side? Or should they be somewhere else within our culture of politics, youth empowerment? These policies, these behavioral positions is something that we need to consider if we're talking about youth empowerment, because we are spending monies and maybe doing the reverse. So it's important that we must demonstrate at a societal level, at a policy level, because the ecological model that we're using for dealing with this program suggests that we're going to deal with the young people at their personal level. We'll deal with their families at another level. We'll deal with the schools and the institution and the community, and there's an intervention at the societal level, policies of government. And that, each one affects the other and causes criminal behavior. I'm happy with the statement made by the minister with regards to school dropouts. And he asked the question, when a child is suspended, what damage, what are we seeking to do? And some years ago, I went to a school because somebody who was working with me asked me to go and represent the child at the school because the child was sent home. And I went there and I spoke with the principal, and I had to explain to him where the child was living. Whereas the child was geographically, it seemed close proximity to the school, the child had to take 2 buses to get to school. Had to go to town, moving away, and then take another bus and go back up. And the home environment was difficult. I said, by punishing, this child has a social problem, and by punishing the child, you're condemning that child towards not even getting a chance. That is at the community level. What's the policy towards this? So these are the areas that I like to point to. These are some of the things that stares us in the face. Initiatives like the laptop program certainly is one of empowerment of our youth. They can decide by themselves when they're going to use the laptop, when they're going to put it away. Youth empowerment is about autonomy of youth. Inequality in our society is one of the major indicators. And of course, research would show that wealthier, less crimes, even if you have wealthy people, but this kind of crimes that we're talking about. So finally, Mr. President, just by bringing all of what I've said to a close, and it's only based on the experience I've had with this program in a direct way, and the interventions that we have had in the past and we continue to do. Mr. President, we built the transit home at Casabah for over $800,000, the transit home with approximately, I think, 25 to accommodate maybe 25 young people. I suspect at this point in time it probably closed. And it's not far from the Boys Training Center, but it's open. But the transit home was supposed to provide an environment for children who probably having some problem at home that they're in transition. You could house them. In the design, we set up a room for even a single mother, because you have young mothers who probably have a little problem and they need to be away from their family for one reason or the other. This infrastructure was designed and conceptualized towards youth empowerment. And its location in keeping with this. I noticed in the budget, and it's really for a question for the minister, I noticed in the budget that we have $3 point something million for the same program that we're speaking today. 3 million thereabout. But I noticed that there's grant of $800,000. I would like to ask whether this is really the grant component that is reflected in the budget estimate for the youth empowerment program. And I need to ask, what is the government overall plan to dovetail a youth empowerment program with the investment that has been made to achieve the same thing? What is the government plan with regards to our family laws, some of them that have already been drafted and is sitting in our books? Family laws. Some of the laws that we use to take our fathers to task for not supporting the children, I think they're as old as the 1950s, long before I was born. I don't know if it's before one of our senators, but before I was born. And that piece of legislation is a very old piece of legislation that gives fathers absolutely, that suggests, one judge told me, that makes fathers, even in a marriage relationship, a putative relationship with the children. They are not seen as totally biologically connected to the kids, because in those days there was no law to suggest that a father is really the father of a child. And therefore those laws still exist on our books. And fathers do, I understood, have more visitation than rights and than parental rights. Are we going to look at those laws? Because what I saw obtained within our family court to dealing with young men, if we are supposed to be successful in advancing a youth empowerment program, these must come into play. And just by example, Mr. President, I started one of those cases with a young man, and the father was asked to be present. And then the father was asked by the magistrate, or she said, but it seemed like I know you. And he said, yes, I was there the last time for not taking care of another child. And the magistrate said, I feel like sending that book behind you. I was in the case and I said, what society where a young man who is not being cared by his father goes to the court, and the court asking for the father, and the father is being reminded, or the father is introducing himself as the one who doesn't care for the others that he has. And what is the role of the state as it relates to the laws associated with the family? Probation, adoption of our children, the safety of our children. So I would like to see and hear not just an intervention of a continuation of a program that has started, but the depth, the belief, and the pro-youth approach in everything that we do, because the youth is a significant part of our population. I support this initiative, and I'm hoping that we apply or overlay on this what I consider to be the political relevant questions. For whom, by whom, when, and where? We should consider communities like Cooleytown, because we visited Cooleytown. Again, it's a very, very interesting community. Some of the communities in our country poverty survey are there because it was a participation survey. And you may not get the statistics like you would get in some of the district populations, like ancillary canneries. We did ancillary canneries. But when you have these communities surrounding the city, like Cooley Town, we visited Cooley Town with CDB at the time and thought that they should have been part of this intervention. So I'm asking the people who would implement this program, not just the city basin of, and look at the demographics of the city, where these people are coming from. It's not just Grass Street, not just on the block. Look at where they are coming from. Seen young men seated in some of those communities that have nothing to do, they're not from there. Let us be strategic. Let us work well for our youth. And let's keep in our minds the words of our commissioner. Our young people need love. And of course, there's one definition for love. God is love. Our young people need God. I thank you, Mr. President, and I thank members for the patient hearing.